Welcome to part 2 of Pokemon Arcana and the Etheria region, a brand new Pokemon Fakemon region based on Dungeons and Dragons. Now, if you have not yet seen part 1 and chosen your starter Pokemon, I will link that down in the description for you to go and check out. But today we're going to go through part 2, where we're going to go through the rest of the decks, including the fossil Pokemon and including some incredible legendary Pokemon. A quick reminder that this region is created by UncommonSoap, who you can find on YouTube, and I've linked their channel down in the description for you to go and check them out. Let's jump straight back into the rest of the decks with Ceramite, the Psychic and Dark type Pokemon. Of course, based on the Mind Flayer, and I think this looks awesome. It's a weird mix of cute, but also very malicious as well. It does look kind of evil, but very little. I think it's a good mix here. Now, this Pokemon and its evolution are served by the new rat, which you might remember from part 1 is the Route 1 rodent based on the cranium rats. So new rat actually serve these Pokemon, and after they're done serving them, the Ceramite and its evolution will actually eat the brains of the new rat as well. It then evolves into Illithoid, and I think this looks amazing as well. It does look like it's got a bit of a long outfit skirt thing going on, but they're actually the tentacles of the Illithoid that are actually positioned that way to make it look more humanoid and to make it look more imposing. But I think it's quite imposing on its own. That face and the evil glare that it's got is definitely very creepy. And this is actually the Pokemon of choice of the evil team within the region, which kind of makes sense. Then next we have Sproutly, the pure grass type Pokemon, and this line are based on Entz. What I really love about this little guy is that its eyes are made of seeds, but they're actually mismatched. One is yellow and one is white, and they're kind of crooked and uneven as well, which I think is very cute. It evolves into Oak Entz, which is now getting a lot larger. It's really interesting how the face is at the bottom of it, but the hands are right near the top acting like branches. It gives it a really interesting feel, I think. And then lastly evolves into Elderwood, so obviously a very big old ancient tree now. We've got some branches coming off to make like a mustache, but it does have a very elderly look to it, I think, which is quite well done. Then next we have Mudstap, the water and ground type Pokemon. Now this and its evolution are based on dragon turtles. And although it's not a dragon type, it is based on that dragon turtle because there's obviously a lot of dragon types within this region already. But I think this looks really cool. I love how it's got a bit of a dangerous look about it. I think like the horns and almost look like eyebrows, and some bumps on the tail and the shell as well are quite nice. Now, I am a big fan of its evolution, Hydropen, getting much larger now. We can see it's become bipedal now, but it still has front flippers as well. Again, we've kind of got that evil, dangerous kind of look in the face. I think the eyes and the horns looking really nice, but those spikes and bumps along the shell and the tail looking really cool as well. Overall, I think a really cool looking mon. Then next we have Minor, the rock and steel type Pokemon. Now this is a combination of dwarves and also battle rager barbarians. So they're looking quite little at the moment. It's almost like a rock covered with some kind of armor plating, which is kind of cool. Definitely looking a lot more like a dwarf now as it evolves into Fourjaw. We can see the arms are giant pickaxes, which is really cool. That helmet is starting to form. It's also got a bit of a beard going on as well, which is really nice. And its final evolution is Warlord, so now it's exchanged those pickaxes on its arms for large battle axes as well. Definitely going into the barbarian kind of look here. What I really love about this though is that little diamond on the end of its beard. I think that's a really cool touch. I can imagine that diamond being very, very precious to this Pokemon. It protects it at all costs. I am a big fan of this next Pokemon though. Frostlet is an ice and flying type Pokemon, and this combines your typical ranger with the snowy owl. And I love that they've combined the owl and the archer, but making it quite different to Decidueye. I love the whites and the light blues, and they're definitely giving its icy coloring. And it's also really cool that within those talons it's holding some arrows as well, which is really nice. That evolves into Arctoshot, and I think this is a phenomenal Pokemon. I love that the tail has actually become a crossbow now, and it's using its feet to pull that back and to use that as a weapon. The look on its face and the wings and the coloring and just the whole design I think is really, really well done. I'm a big fan of owls, and this has got to be one of my favorite owl Fakemon I've ever seen, I think. Now, it wouldn't be a Dungeons and Dragons region if we didn't have a Mimic Pokemon. So here is our Mimic. It is called Mimimor, the pure normal type Pokemon. Obviously looking like a treasure chest, but with the teeth and the tongue hanging out, looking very, very dangerous. But a really nice touch that the artist has done here is the Pokeball that's on the top is actually flipped upside down. Now, if you're a keen adventurer and notice it's upside down, you might realize it's a Mimic, but if not, you might be in for a bit of a surprise. I think this is a really cool mon. Also, just a quick reminder that I'm no D&D expert, so I apologize if I make any mistakes here. But if you're enjoying this video and you want to check out more, make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right, let's move on. Up next, we have Gelixa, which is a normal and poison type Pokemon. Now, this Pokemon and its evolutionary line are based on the gelatinous cube, but this starts off as being born from a volatile potion. So I love how happy this thing looks. We can see the cork that's coming off the side of their head rather than being in the potion itself, and we can see it starting to sort of drip out of that encasing that it's got as the potion there. That potion is only a small part of it now when it evolves into Geltalist. We can now see that it's acting more like the gelatinous cube and it's starting to absorb everything around it. We can see some bones and some rocks and twigs in there as well. Still got that really happy expression there, which I think is really nice. And then it gets really large again as it evolves into Alchemax. We can see it's got so much more within it now. It's starting to suck up absolutely everything it can find. It's got a treasure chest, it's got some skulls, it's got some weapons, so much stuff. But I love that there's still the little tiny potion that's in there as well to show what it came from. Then next we have Impyro, the fire and normal type Pokemon. Now this is just a single stage Pokemon with no evolution, but I don't think it needs one. I think this has so much character behind it just on its own. Now this is based on a red panda, but it's also based on just the notion of wizards spamming Fireball way too much. So this Pokemon loves to use Fireball as well. And we can see it's holding like almost like a bit of a fire elemental in its hand, but the crazy eyes that it's got and the goggles over its face as well. I think this looks really, really nice. Orblink is the next Pokemon, which is a Psychic and Poison type, and this is, of course, based on our Beholder. Now, Orblink looks really cute, and this Pokemon is really friendly, and it loves to go out and explore, and it pretty much just doesn't realize how powerful it is. It wants to go and make friends, and it doesn't realize it's got giant death orbs on top of its head. But I love it. I love how we've turned a Beholder into looking really cute. I think that's a cool touch. It changes quite a lot though when it evolves into Xanathorb. So this Pokemon is not so cute and friendly and outgoing now. This Pokemon is actually really malevolent and is really, really evil. We can see the orbs have changed to black now, and of course they've got a lot more. The face is looking really evil and kind of demonic, and this is a whole different vibe to its pre-evolution. Next, we're going to go into 4 different types of elementals. So first is our fire elemental, of course. This is Ignos, the pure fire type. Just looking like a little ball of fire at the moment, which is looking kind of cute. But his evolution is looking really nice. This is Eldraforge. Now, this is a giant flame elemental with a huge molten rock hammer. And this is actually based on Ragnaros, which is not part of D&D, but still really cool anyway. So being based off Ragnaros, I think is really nice and fits a fire elemental for sure. The sort of magma-y looks around like making a bit of a belt and cuffs for the hands as well is a cool touch. I like that a lot. Next, our water elemental, which is kind of also like our ice elemental as well. This is called Droplice, water and ice type. Looking like a big water droplet, but it has got some little icicles on the end of its hands there. And that evolves into Frostide, which is now looking a lot larger. And this is actually based on the Lich King. So another Warcraft reference, but I think it just works really well for this, I think. Really interesting blade arms that it's got, but I think the shoulders and the head definitely matching the Lich King with the big icicles and the big crown on its head, which looks really cool. Then next up, rock elemental is Pebblord. I think this looks really cute. I like the little face that it's got. It is a ground and rock type Pokemon. But again, all these base form elementals are quite small. But it evolves into something much bigger, of course, in Kraggerok. So now this Pokemon is so large, it actually doesn't have feet, but it drags those massive rocky hands and knuckles along the ground as it walks to kind of pull itself across. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like a silverback gorilla using its knuckles to walk on, I think. And then our last elemental is our air elemental, and this is Nimbus, electric and flying type Pokemon. Looking just like a little mini tornado at the moment, but I like how I've got a little lightning bolt eye and a little star eye in there as well. And that evolves into Cyclunda, so now looking like a giant thunderstorm mixed with a tornado. I love that the arms are actually like lightning bolts coming down, but it still has the lightning bolts in the eye as well, which works really nicely. Then we have Klabonk, which is a grass and ground type Pokemon. Now this is based on Hill Giants, and it's looking kind of little at the moment, but I think it does look like it's going to evolve into something big. That trunk that it's holding is huge compared to the rest of the body, and the artist has said that the only reason this is a grass type is because it's holding a tree trunk to clobber you with, which I think makes a lot of sense. Our evolved form, as I thought, is looking massive, and especially that massive trunk that's holding. It's not just a trunk anymore, it's really just a whole tree that's uprooted and just using to clobber people. So I think that looks really, really nice. I also really like the giant spikes that's got on the shoulder pads too. Then next we have Kenkri, the poison and dark type Pokemon. Now this is looking like a little baby vulture at the moment, but this is a really interesting line as we're going to see as it evolves. As it evolves into Kenkron, we can see now that it starts to got a little bit of a hag look. We can see that sort of old lady hair bun that it's got, and almost just like the way it's standing as well with its hands in the air, which is kind of interesting. And then lastly evolves into Kenkovan. So we've got our hag look, but it's also mixed with a Kenku as well, which is a really interesting combination here. We can see that really long beak with a little wart on the end, which is nice as well. Definitely kind of got that wretched hag feel to it, I think, with the long claws and just the way it's sort of sitting, and a whole combination of different things here, but it works out really well in the end. Swinal is next, who is a rock and dark type Pokemon. Now this line are based on Orthon. And Orthon is a type of devil, which we're definitely going to see influences of as it evolves. I do love that this thing is holding a massive knife. It's almost as big as the rest of the body, really. But that rocky look on the arms and on the head as well is really cool. As it evolves into Crag Tusk, it actually gets the second blade now that it's holding. It's dual wielding, but that rocky look on the head, creating really large horns, is really nice too. Mixed with the tusks as well, it's got like a whole range of different weapons to use. I absolutely love its final evolution in Obsidiboar though. This thing is massive, and we can see the skulls in the rocks there, giving it that very demonic look that we see. The spikes along like the belts and almost like the scratches on the top of it there as well, and just the whole combination is really, really nice. This final evolution is also based on Ganon as well, so it's cool to add that into the mix there. It kind of fits the whole vibe, I think. Then next we have Kabut, the normal and fighting type Pokemon. Now this almost looks scared in a way. I think the really large eyes that it has definitely makes it look very cute, but this and its evolution are of course based on Owlbears. So that very owl look in the face, but obviously the bear body as well to match. I've been so excited to show you this final evolution. I love this one. This is Noctavage. Definitely got that owl bear look within it. Really large, really imposing, really aggressive, but of course the owl look in the face specifically. Having a really nice scar on its shoulder, but it's got like an owl tail as well. Altogether works really well. Next, we're going into our 2 fossil Pokemon for the region. So first is Stegite, the fire and rock type Pokemon. Now this is based on a Stegosaurus, and the artist has said that it kind of seems weird to add a dinosaur into a Dungeons and Dragons region, but it does make sense because a lot of people like to polymorph into dinosaurs, so it can kind of work in the region. They do exist within the Dungeons and Dragons world. But really cool how the Stegosaurus look for the spines on the back is actually created with diamonds, which is nice. And then evolves into Stegamond, and I was thinking with the first one, I couldn't really see the fire typing, but I think it definitely shows here in the second one. That molten lava rocky look throughout the back with the diamonds are embedded into definitely makes sense for a fire type now, I think. And then the second fossil Pokemon is Mjolnir, the electric and rock type Pokemon. Now this one instead is based on an Ankylosaurus. So it's got some really nice armor plating down its head and its back, but its tail is actually based on Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer from Norse mythology. So Ankylosaurus normally has some kind of club for its tail, so making it into Thor's hammer I think is really cool. That then becomes the main feature when it evolves into Mjolnir. So now Thor's hammer is definitely seen on the back there. Even just the little pattern on the side of it definitely matches Thor's hammer, which I think works really, really well. But what I also love is that electric blue coloring and spikes along the back of this Pokemon here. It looks really, really nice. And it's kind of like static electricity waves. Looks like they're constantly flowing along the back as well, which is really nice. I think this is my favorite out of the 2 fossils. Next is Molturus, which is a fire and steel type Pokemon. Now this line combines Karlach with Minotaurs. And I love the stance of this Pokemon. I think the way that looks like it's ready to battle is really cool. But even for the first stage evolution, it's got really large horns, which is really cool too. It then evolves into Volcator, so now looking much larger. I love that it's got like vents all over its body. We can see the vents in the chest, but even one of the horns as well has been cut off and is now making another vent. And that's because this Pokemon is so full of heat and rage that it needs to expel it in some way. So it's got all the vents all over the body, which I think is just really cool. I also love the massive nose ring that's got. It's really nice. Next, I'm going to show you the pseudo-legendary Pokemon for the region. So this is Tyranids, the ground and steel type Pokemon. Now this line is based on the Tarask, which is essentially just a giant murder dinosaur. So it works for a pseudo-legendary, I think. This looks like a lot of base form pseudo-legendaries, which is looking kind of cute and kind of little, but I do like that it's got the horns on the face and also the really big spikes on the back as well. It's almost like foreshadowing what it's going to become. Evolves into Terraloy, so now getting a little bit larger. We can see the head has become quite large now, especially compared to the rest of the body, but those horns definitely do impact the size of it there. And the spikes on the back getting much larger, and there's a few more coming down the tail as well. And then lastly evolves into Taranox. So this thing looks like an absolute beast. This is so large, it's so imposing and so deadly with all those spikes going on. I think that is so cool. Now you guys might remember from part 1, the giant purple worm Pokemon, which I said was the largest of the entire dex. Apart from that Pokemon, this is the largest. So this is the second largest out of the entire dex, which makes a lot of sense for a Tarask Pokemon. And I think this fits the pseudo-legendary really, really well. Now we're going to go into the legendary Pokemon for the region. So there are 5 legendaries in total. There's a trio to start with, and then there's the 2 box art legendaries. So the first of the trio is Favorius, which is a dragon and fairy type Pokemon. Of course, based on our fairy dragons, but this is also based on Figment from Disney. And I think this really looks like Figment a lot, so I think it's really cool to add that into this kind of design here. The horns match it really well, the coloring, just the fact that like it almost looks kind of small for a dragon, but the wings are quite large, and I think the coloring works really nicely within it as well. Definitely looks like a fairy dragon. This first trio of legendary Pokemon also represents spirit, mind, and body. So Favorius represents the spirit. The Pokemon that represents the mind is Mindflayers, the dragon and psychic type Pokemon. Now these are based on gem dragons, but this one specifically is based on the amethyst dragon. We can definitely see that within that rocky kind of look, but also with the coloring as well. The large rocky tail that it's got, I think, is quite nice. It's almost like as big as the rest of the body, really. And it looks like it'll be really heavy. It's also got a couple of spikes on the end as well, which is quite nice. But it's interesting, it's almost got a couple of amethysts sort of floating off the body, really, along the head and the neck there, which is kind of interesting. And then the Pokemon that represents the body within this trio is Orthrius, the dragon and steel type Pokemon. Now this is just generally based on metallic dragons, but this obviously looks very metallic in itself. But I do love that obviously we've got our dragon, but almost look at that, it's got suit of armor around it as well. On the shoulder pads, on the neck, on the back legs, definitely looks like it's covered in armor. Next, I'm going to show you the 2 box art legendaries, and the first is Dragnarok, the dragon and dark type Pokemon. Of course, based on Tiamat. It makes sense to have this as a legendary, I think. Now, in part 1, I showed you all 5 of the chromatic dragons, and all of them come together here to make Dragnarok. So each of those 5 heads matches the 5 heads from the chromatic dragons. A reminder that if you haven't seen part 1 yet, that is linked in the description for you to go and check after this one. Now, essentially, Tiamat is like the queen of all chromatic dragons, so bringing all those together to make a really badass looking legendary Pokemon, I think is so cool. And then next we have Aethergos, the dragon and steel type Pokemon. Now this is based off Bahamut, who is like a god of magic. And within this region, this Pokemon created every other Pokemon. And it brought in the legendary trio to make sure the region stays within balance. But then eventually Dragnarok came and broke the balance. So Aethergos had to come back to make sure everything is back in order. This Pokemon is also looking really nice. I'm missing the color that the previous one had. I think the color that was in Dragnarok was really, really nice. This one is all very much monochromatic in a way, but it kind of makes sense for a Bahamut Pokemon here. I think the detail within it is looking really, really nice though. So I'm a big fan of both of these box art legendaries, but I think I'm going to have to personally choose the Dragnarok side. I've loved going through the Etheria region with you, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. Here's some of my favorites from today's video, and I'd love to know your favorites down in the comments below. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, it is linked up here, or maybe you want to check this playlist with a bunch more Fakemon regions too. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.